Would you pray with me, please? Oh God, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts, no matter where we are, be pleasing and acceptable to you this day, for you are truly our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Okay, she's having a bad day. She's already gone to get water early in the morning with the rest of her friends, with the rest of the women of the village, the city that they're in. And she brings it home after she visits with everybody, and she starts doing the daily chores and steps outside for a moment. Now, one of the things you have to understand is oftentimes in this time in history, the animals of a family, of a household, would be in the house with the people who lived there. They would be like pets. The goats, the sheep, the lambs, whatever, would be very close, sometimes in an attachment right outside the door, but oftentimes milling around with them. She steps out the door, the goat comes, is curious about what she's doing in the kitchen area, and knocks over her water that she'd gathered that morning. It's noontime, it's hot outside, and she has to return to get more water. She'll need it as she prepares the evening meal. Okay, now I know most of you have a completely different understanding of this story. I've been preaching this text for 25 years or more. But there are some important things for us to look at. One is it's one of the longest conversations that Jesus has with anybody. That alone is significant, right? Who is this woman? The Samaritan woman. That's the crowd he's not supposed to hang out with. Oh, and she's a woman, not supposed to hang out with her, and she certainly isn't supposed to talk to him. And it's the middle of the day, and he's tired, and yet they have this beautiful, unfolding conversation. We often hear of this story as one filled with secrets, hers, and shame, her behavior prior to this. I'm so tired in the Bible of women taking the short end, right? We're always harlots or troublemakers or never upstanding citizens. We're always looked down upon, which is part of the day. But in today's world, this should no longer be how we see women. So I'm going to invite you to unravel your understanding and prior learning about this text and see if you might hear something new that will work with your life now. Earlier this year, one of my favorite authors, Sue Monk Kidd, came out with a new book. It's called The Book of Longings. The protagonist in the book, Anna, is a woman who lives in and around Galilee, around the time of Jesus, and she has a different vision in her mind of how women might live in her world. She wants to write the neglected stories of women she knows, the real experiences of what happens. And she's well educated and has been taught many things, but she struggles in trying to fulfill her calling until she meets this man, Jesus. Meeting Jesus changes everything for Anna. So I thought about Sue Monk Kidd's book as I was preparing for today. It helped me to kind of look through the text and particularly look through the history and tradition that has come with it. You see, because what has been decided and told about this story for all of these years isn't necessarily something that we know. So I'm inviting you, as I have, to see this story as not one filled with shame and secrets, but to see it in a new light. Perhaps we can see it as a story of breaking barriers, because that's exactly what's happening. Jesus and the woman, breaking those barriers of race and gender, and of whom should talk to whom in society. Can we see it as a story of belonging, of transformation, and certainly, as it has been seen before, a story of discipleship? Now, I want to go to the end of the story, even past where we read for today, and point out something. You see, she meets with Jesus, has this conversation, and then she puts her jar down, certainly one bigger than this, leaves it behind, and goes to the city. Now, we've always been given the impression that she is kind of an outcast in the city, that she doesn't have friends, that the women don't want to hang out with her, that she certainly doesn't want to hang out with them, and that's why she goes in the middle of the day. We're also given this story about, well, she has 5 husbands, and Jesus says that to her, and all of that is true. And then we make judgments about, why does she have 5 husbands? Well, perhaps she just sleeps around too much. The reality of the day for women like her is perhaps she couldn't have children. And then the men she was married to would have gotten rid of her immediately. Or perhaps her first husband was elderly and had died early on after their marriage. And then what happens is the women were married to the brothers of the first husband. We don't know those things, but we've been given ideas of who she is. So I would like you to consider this. If she is a woman of perhaps not the best reputation, if people really don't want to hang around her, why, when she goes to the city at the end of the text, do the people listen to her? Would you? If someone comes that you don't care for, that you do not respect, that you are not in relationship with, would you listen to this crazy story about, this man met me by the well, and he knew me, and I believe everything he says? Would you really listen to that? I certainly wouldn't. Not in these kinds of circumstances, so I want you to pay attention to the end. She says to the people, "Come and see a man who has told me everything I've done. Could this man," these are her words, "could this man be the Christ?" And they left the city and were on their way to see Jesus. And then we've got a little interlude where he's dealing with the disciples. And then the text goes on. Many Samaritans in the city believed in Jesus because of the woman's word when she testified, "He told me everything I had done." Really? So why, if we believe that, how could we believe that no one respected her? I believe she was in a relationship. These are how towns were, cities were. People knew one another and cared for one another and respected one another. They would not have given her the time of day, no matter what kind of story she told. Nope, I don't believe that would have happened. I think that she is a woman, certainly of grief for whatever had happened in her life, but that she's also respected, that she's a woman of integrity. She never lies to Jesus in this text. She never tries to brush off going, yeah, there was those 5. No, she's very honest, very upfront. She has a good religious understanding. She asks very pertinent questions about what's happening, the stories that Jesus is telling her. And she has a level of intuition, a kind of a gut response, I think, to who this man Jesus is. As a woman alone, should she have stayed to talk to him? No, there was something inside of her, an internal, intuitive response that says, this is okay. I will do this and see where it will lead, and look where it led. She stays, and they begin this conversation, and she has insight. Again, back to this question to her friends. Could he be the Christ? Could he? Oh, yes, she probably has shame in her life. Don't we all? Don't we all have those stories that we really don't want anybody to know? But her life is so much more than that. And Jesus builds this relationship with her. He explains to her what's going to happen. Believe me, woman, the time is coming when you and your people will worship my Father, neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You and your people worship what you don't know. We worship what we know because salvation is from the Jews. But the time is coming and is here when true worshipers will worship spirit and truth. Really? That's a lot. Never mind the whole earlier conversation about this was water that came from the well and the living water that was something separate. He's talking to her on levels that are really deep and are really important. She's not some airhead that doesn't understand what he's saying. She's figuring it out, and she's part of this conversation. And he shares it with her. And then he shares who he is. He says God is spirit, and it is necessary to worship God in spirit and truth. And the woman said, I know the Messiah is coming. How on earth would she know that? I know the Messiah is coming, the one who is called the Christ. When he comes, he will teach everything to us. And Jesus said to her, I am the one who speaks with you. Can you imagine? This woman that throughout history we have said, she was always on the wrong side. No, this woman, Jesus reveals himself to her. And she goes on to tell the city where she lived, tell all those people the transformation in her, and also leads us to a way of discipleship, leads us to a way of knowing the Christ for ourselves through this living water. She is strong, and she is resilient, and she has moved people to follow Jesus and transform their lives to be disciples. Have we? Have we done this same thing? The text tells us that she leaves her water jug behind. I love that. And instead carries within her the living water of Christ. Dear friends, may it be true for us that in this season of unraveling, we learn to look at the text that comes to us, perhaps in brand new ways, so that we can have a clearer, new understanding of how it affects us and how we live today and tomorrow and the rest of the days that we have. Because for her and the people she met, it transformed their world. May that continue with us. May that continue with you. Living water, the living water of Christ within.